I am really glad that we're all here together. And what I thought we could do before we go too far into the presentation would be for us to do a quick overview of who we are, a little bit more than just our name, and share a little bit about your background and why you're on this panel today. So, Tiffany, did you want to kick that off for us and tell us a little bit more about you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Rebecca. And thank you to Eightfold and HCI for hosting this event. Really appreciate being here. As mentioned, my name is Tiffany Toussaint, and I lead recruiting and talent acquisition here at Mortenson Construction. We are headquartered in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market and do work all across the nation. And I've spent 25 plus years in human resources and talent acquisition, primarily in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, and outside of working in corporations as well as in a executive staffing firm. I've volunteered, spent many years volunteering with human resources and recruiting associations, helping people with their continuing education and getting up to speed on what's going on in recruiting and human resources. And very happy to be here today.
Awesome. Jamie, let's flip it to you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks again to Eightfold AI and to HCI for having me. I'm Jaime Nielsen. I am the Chief People Officer at Trimble. I have been in the field of human resources really in a generalist capacity. I've touched a little bit of everything from talent attraction, as we call it in Trimble, to benefits and compensation. You name it, I've kind of done it. I've spent the last 6 years with Trimble. We are a technology organization serving multiple industries. And the last 2 of those 6 years with Trimble, I've been in the Chief People Officer role. So fairly new to role still, but yet have 2 years under my belt, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. So Rebecca Warren, I am with Eightfold AI. I have been with this organization for about 1.5 years now. Man, time has gone quickly. Prior to that, my background is in talent acquisition. I've had the opportunity to work in both small and large companies, as well as consultant, all the way from, and as a permanent employee, all the way from sourcer up to senior leadership. So excited to work with Eightfold, which is a company that provides insights and is a platform that helps you understand your data, recruit faster using data and insights to move people through the process of getting folks into your organization and then helping support them throughout the time with them. So we are going to chat a little bit here about how to attract and retain top talent. So let me go ahead and move this forward. So our agenda here is going to be pretty clear, right? So we're going to talk about the candidate and the talent attraction experience, talent acquisition experience. We're going to talk about the employee and the HR experience. We're going to get some best practice recommendations from our experts here. And then we're going to talk about some predictions for the future. So as we think about that candidate and that talent acquisition experience, I love TA. I love people. I love helping them find the right career, no matter what we've called it, right? I think as we've been in this field, we've called it selection, we've called it recruiting, now we're talent acquisition or talent attraction. But all of those things are about helping folks find that right job, that right role in that right organization. So that has always been a driver for me. I will say, though, over the last, we've noticed big changes over the last 20 some years, and it hasn't always been easy. And as we look at where we are right now in our TA space, we see that 95% of organizations are experiencing challenges with recruiting and hiring talent. 1 in 5 reported their recruiters are overwhelmed. And I don't know about you, but what I've been seeing, I think that number is probably higher. And there is that struggle to find talent due to what we're calling that talent shortage. Folks, for lots of different reasons, not available for the jobs that we have open to fill. So let's take a look at what that looks like from your perspective. So our first poll is going to pop up on the screen right now. And we're going to ask you about how your organization has changed its approach to talent acquisition in 2022. There's the poll. So feel free to throw your thoughts in there. Okay. And Tiffany and Jamie certainly want you to pop in if you see anything that looks surprising or interesting as we look at these results. It looks like the majority have come into, we've changed our approach, but are still using existing tools and tech. It doesn't look like anyone is confused on where to start. All right. I don't know if there's more feedback coming in, but yep, here we go. Oh, here we go. And I think this will be fun for us to chat about further on in the presentation about what that looks like, from changing approaches, what tech looks like, what are we using, and what do we expect to be using as things go forward. Let me just scroll down and see if anybody else is. Oh, there's a couple of folks that says, gosh, it's a big thing to think about changing not just technology, but also the full approach. And I know Jamie and Tiffany, we both talked about what that looks like, from making sweeping changes, and not just making the changes, but the change management that comes along with it. All right. So it looks like we've landed in the changed our approach, but still using existing tools and tech. So let's talk a little bit about that, what that looks like from the candidate experience over the last 3 to 5 years. So Tiffany, do you want to share a little bit about your perspectives on what that looks like and what you've seen?
Yeah, and thank you, Rebecca. And I think a lot of people have experienced this in some way, shape, or form or another. And if you sit back and think about it, it kind of makes sense. So we had, obviously in 2020, a significant slowdown in a lot of things, and that, heavily impacted organizations, employers. We're seeing, sort of the aftermath of that with supply chain concerns and delays with getting products and services delivered. While a lot of organizations, either downsized or shut down, you think in particular about hospitality, a lot of those individuals that were impacted, went back and reinvented themselves, either went back to school to pursue a degree, or went to school to pursue a degree, or started their own business, went off on their own, or completely switched gears to ensure that they were employable. So as you see there, many people switched and kind of reinvented themselves. So when we're looking for individuals, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, where we can't find people to fill the available roles, or the skills don't necessarily align with what is needed for open roles, a lot of that in today's market is driven by the fact that people have shifted gears in order to maintain their lifestyles. Employer-driven versus employee-driven. For those of you that are impacted in your daily work with recruiting, or work in talent acquisition, staffing, or have some role to play in bringing individuals into your organization, you've probably felt that extreme shift where there are literally more jobs than there are people to fill them. So we're all competing for talent across the entire nation, and even across the globe. But it's not just about competing for talent within our own specific industries, it's competing for talent, period. And a lot of individuals are, receiving multiple offers, they're getting counter offers, they're getting promotions with their current employer, sign-on bonuses like we've never seen before. So we're in this situation where candidates are driving the market. They have the upper hand here. So how that impacts what we do in recruiting and what we do in talent acquisition is, and we'll talk about this in just a little bit, but it's that value proposition. What is it that makes your opportunity unique, and what are you doing to stand out so that your offer is more compelling. And it's not necessarily all about the compensation, but what is it that you have to offer? What opportunities do you have to offer that are more compelling and more so of interest to candidates than the competition? And with the increase in individuals working virtually, people are less willing to relocate and more willing to say, hey, I can do this job, I can do this work from wherever. So I've seen that a lot with the candidates that my team and I are interacting with on a regular basis, where they're not necessarily as willing to do a lot of travel. They're not necessarily as willing to relocate from one part of the country to another, because they've realized that the work that they can do can be done from virtually anywhere. So that is something that organizations will need to look at and consider, kind of evaluate where and how the work can be done. And the other item here you'll see is that compensation expectations have changed. So people are looking more holistically at total rewards. So what is it that you can offer in addition to my base compensation that is going to, recognize and reward me for what I'm expected to do within your organization? A couple of other things that aren't appearing here in print, but have definitely impacted what we have going on in talent acquisition, is that we are seeing fewer applications. So people coming directly to us. So we are more proactively having to do digging and sourcing and unearthing in different ways. And as some of you have indicated, using some different tools and technology to do that. So we're finding that there are a lot fewer people that are, raising their hand and applying, and there's an increase in the overall number of passive candidates as a result of recruiters having to do some extra outreach.
Yeah, and I'll say, Tiffany, to tack onto that, one of the things that was actually compelling for me when I was looking at my next role and looking at Eightfold is that we are 100% remote. So I was able to work remotely, and we were able to move to where we wanted to move. We weren't stuck in a particular location. So I am actually a bullet point 3, right? Less popular to relocate for a particular organization. So that I know we're continuing to see that as an issue for candidates.
Definitely.
Let me ask you really quick as well. When you think about when candidates are applying and they're interested in your roles, how long do they wait around for you to communicate with them?
Not long. It seriously is not long. So we've all heard where, as a recruiter or as a candidate, you have, 6 to 10 seconds for a recruiter to review your resume and determine whether or not they're going to look further. Now, as it states here, employer-driven now to employee-driven or talent-driven, it's the reverse. So you have, a day or two before a candidate has moved on. So if we're not responding to applications within, a couple of days, maybe maximum of a week, they're moving on.
Right. And high volume is even different, right? Sometimes you have hours before somebody is looking at another opportunity.
Right.
Well, so let's talk about what candidates are looking for today. And you have addressed that in some of the things that you talked about. But looking at what candidates are expecting, Jaime or Tiffany, feel free to share a little bit about what you think on these topics.
Definitely. These are all valid, relevant points as we, interact with our candidates and are talking about the benefits of working for our organization in particular. So Mortenson here in Minneapolis and elsewhere through the nation, talking with candidates about the culture. It's very important for individuals, if they are going to consider making a move, what is it that is so unique and beneficial about your environment versus what I already know? So whatever you are fostering in your organizations, make sure that you are able and your representatives, your recruiters, your hiring managers, that they have the tools and information they need to effectively communicate what it is truly like to work for your organization.
Yeah. What about thinking of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say, I would add on to that, to what Tiffany was saying about culture. I think, we're definitely seeing people really wanting to not only know that they're coming in to do meaningful work, they want to know that they feel tied to the company's purpose. And that extends, far beyond what the organization is there to do. It expands into ESG, to environmental and social and governance. Candidates are really wanting to feel that they're doing good in the world. And I think the other thing, kind of from a culture perspective, that we've really recognized really heavily during the pandemic, they wanted to know how we were handling the pandemic. What were we doing? Were we hiring? Were we laying off? Were we mandating vaccines? These are things that became really relevant and top of mind. The flexibility point. Can I work from home? We are not 100% remote workforce. We do still embrace the office. We, from an innovation perspective, believe we're better together. But we also believe that we've done this pandemic thing really well in a virtual environment. And so it was a hard to answer candidates' question of, can you be fully remote in the future world? And so we really had to think about, what does that mean for each role in the organization?
Yeah, great call out. And I think one of the other things that we're seeing a lot of that ties into all of that in the workplace is, what does your diversity look like? And I know we're using a lot of different names now: equity, inclusion, belonging. All of those pieces are critical, especially in a fully remote hybrid work. No matter where you're at, it's really important to look at what that's like. And it can't just be about gender or ethnicity, right? It has to be about folks being able to bring their whole self to work. So what kind of background do they have that make us better, whether that's gender diversity or expression, right? Tattoos, piercings, natural hair, the work people do and how they do it. We have to really continue to think about what that makeup of the organization looks like, because it makes us stronger. So that cookie cutter approach that we have been maybe looking at in some organizations is not going to cut it today.
That is so true, Rebecca. And, I've been with Mortenson Construction for about 1.5 years. So we started our roles at about the same time. And as I was interviewing, not just here, but with other organizations, that was one of the things that was incredibly important to me when you mentioned, being able to be myself. Can I come to work and not have to check any part of who I am at the door? And, is someone going to say, you're a square peg, here's a round hole, get your work done? We can't do that anymore.
Agree. So let's talk about that. What should talent acquisition take into consideration when hiring in 2022? And I know this list that we have on here is actually really short compared to all of the things we should think about, right? But what should we be thinking about when we're looking at talent attraction coming up?
I definitely think, and just based on the experience that I've got over the last, couple of decades now, reevaluating the job descriptions, the responsibilities, the duties. And we say here, reduce job qualifications. And I'll rephrase that by saying, looking at adjacent experience. So is a bachelor's degree absolutely positively required in order for the role to be done? If it's not, remove it as a requirement. You're not reducing the work that needs to be done. You're just looking differently at skills and experience. Can a 2-year degree suffice? Or do we do, in lieu of a degree, 5 to 7 years of experience in a specific field or industry? So because people are the talent, the candidates have a wide variety of experience, again, getting back to that diverse makeup of our employee population, look differently at what we are requiring for jobs in order for them to actually be successful in completing the tasks and the requirements for the position.
Right.
And focusing on skills, grit, non-traditional backgrounds. So, we are, we're a construction company. So construction degrees are a large, a large degree of individuals within our organization have construction degrees. So we have now been having conversations about how do we branch out and include adjacent degrees, or do we look at different types of experience? Can we look at supply chain versus construction management? So looking at, what are things that are tangential to the work that we're doing, where the skills are transferable. One of the things that is, I think, incredibly important, and it also ties into your organization's culture, your environment, and can impact, whether or not someone considers your organization or whether or not they stay. And that's that transparency. Be clear, provide a day in the life view of what it's like to work in that specific role. Have someone who's currently in the role participate in the selection process to provide candidates with a realistic insight into what the role entails. So be critically transparent, and not just about the role itself, but what it's like to work for the organization. What's the environment like? What's the culture like? What benefits are available to individuals who work for the organization? What is the mission or vision of the business, and how does that impact the team members, our customers, the communities in which we're doing business? And it was alluded to just a little bit ago when Rebecca talked about high volume. So within our organization, and I know this to be true in other businesses, you've got different sort of recruiting cycles. So everyone understands the difference between, or most people understand the difference between recruiting interns and recruiting direct hire experienced individuals. Those cycle times are different. The cycle time is also different, or the recruiting experience can be a little bit different when you're looking at high volume. So maybe you're staffing a call center, you're staffing a warehouse or a manufacturing facility or a construction job site. That's very different than filling roles in HR, IT, or business development. So having two different processes in place that align, but allow some flexibility based on the type of roles that are being filled is critical, especially when you have those different types of tracks, so to speak, within your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so if we're thinking about all of these things to take into consideration today, what should talent acquisition leadership look like? What needs to change or shift in order to make that experience for those candidates coming in the door meet their expectations?
Well, clearly, Rebecca, all TA leadership should look like us, right?
That's, of course, right? Agree.
So one of the things that in the year and a half that I've been here, I started out by assessing. So I came in and I sat back and I observed and then assessed and collected information from the individuals on the team, as well as some of our the higher users of our partnership. And one of the things that was very clear was that we were reactive and very transactional. So taking that shift from reactionary and just in time to being more proactive and strategic. So I think, and it's not an issue that's isolated to Mortenson, but it's something that I've seen in other parts of various organizations where recruiting has kind of been brought in last minute. So we have a need to hire, we're ready to make an offer. Can we create a requisition? Well, building those partnerships so that we can be proactive, we can be business partners that specialize in talent acquisition and human resources, and then have a strategy in place for bringing talent into the organization. In addition to that, it's being able to use our data to tell a story. And it's not necessarily a story about the individual recruiters on the team. It's the story of recruiting for your organization. So the more data you have to share with leaders, the more well-rounded your decisions around talent acquisition will be. You will know which positions are going to take the longest. You will know which regions are the most difficult to recruit from. And that will help you drive which sources you use when you start recruiting, how you partner with the communities and the managers in those particular parts of the world. And use of AI to match candidates to roles based on skills. I think this is something that's becoming more and more prevalent and more woven into how we operate in talent acquisition. And candidly, my team is not there yet, but I do know that as we start evolving the tools and resources that we're using, this will be incorporated into how we operate. And I've seen it happen just through conversations and networking. Use of technology and AI to bring candidates to the forefront or identify names and profiles of individuals based on their skills. And there's debate as to whether or not that helps or hinders diversity. But in a lot of instances it can, because it's sort of along the lines of, looking at blind resumes. So we're looking at skills versus, the name of the individual or the city where they're living.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we look at this slide, the trend clearly is using data and technology to make our lives easier, right?
Yes.
Like there's a lot of things that we can do ourselves, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense for us to do it ourselves. It makes sense to figure out how do we automate that? How do we take that off? How do we allow TA to be more strategic as opposed to being stuck in the weeds or doing the scheduling? Some of those things that just are big time sucks, but also don't take advantage of the skill sets that we're hiring for inside of that TA space. Well, so let's talk about, Tiffany, your best practices, your top 5. Share with us your top 5 on what TA folks need to be paying attention
to. So a handful of things here, Rebecca and the audience. So a streamlined application process. So we recently moved from one applicant tracking system to another. And the partner with whom I was working on making that happen, she and I had the goal of ensuring that the application process took less than 2 minutes. And that, depending on your vantage point, that may seem like a really long time or it may seem really short. And we did get it down to, I think it was less than a minute. So the fewer clicks,
impressive.
Yes, the fewer clicks, the better. And again, we've got 2 different, sets of kind of work streams where we've got skilled trades workers working on our construction sites. They're not sitting down at a laptop and filling out an application. They're literally responding to a text message on their phone and then showing up to a job site. So we have to make sure that, we're catering to, both sets of populations. So make it easy. This number 2 is huge for me. Just be respectful of candidates' time. And that is with the application process, with your interview. So start and end on time. One of the things that happens too frequently is we say we prioritize talent and that talent is our number 1 priority. Yet when we have an interview and a business meeting comes up, we bump the interview. We need to flip-flop that. If there's a business meeting that's taking place and an interview needs to happen, that interview should be the priority. If you truly value talent in your organization, find a proxy, find someone that can either step into the interview on your team's behalf or step into that business meeting on your behalf. But by all means, respect the candidate's time. And then toward the tail end of the process, and this is something that I'm trying to work toward, and that's being ready for extending an offer as closely as you can to that final interview. In some instances, if you're ready to deliver at the end of that final interview, or if you need to debrief and then present that offer, do so as quickly as you can, because especially in this market where it's candidate driven, we don't have the luxury of time. And I mentioned this before with transparency, be clear and candid about the role. Not everything is sunshine, rainbows, and roses. We know this. So be candid about, the ups as well as the downs of the opportunity. And then follow up and feedback. So communicate with candidates. And I know Rebecca and I have talked about this before, where we've called candidates and said, thank you for your time. This is not my favorite type of conversation, but you didn't get the job. And the number of times those individuals have said, oh my goodness, thank you for calling me back to let me know.
They're surprised. They're surprised with the follow-up.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
Like how it's not, and I it's not my favorite part of the job, but it's something that needs to be done, because what if they're the runner up and 6 months down the road, we have that role open again. We have a relationship with that individual where we can pick up the phone or text them and say, hey, I have an opportunity for you. And, we've just made our lives and their lives a lot easier. So follow up, follow through. And I mentioned this already, be timely with the offers. So as closely to that final interview as you can, be extending those offers, and, put your best foot forward so you don't have to do any negotiating. Be as fruitful as you can with that offer, whether it's, front loading paid time off, if you're still using PTO programs, base comp incentives, anything you can do to show that individual is wanted and that you value what they have to offer.
Yeah, because I think what we have clearly seen that has shifted over the last, 10 to 15 years is that you're not just selling a job. You're not just selling a company. You're also selling that brand, right? So you are representing an organization. You're also representing every product, every person, everything that happens inside that organization. And social media can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So making sure that you are treating every candidate with that same sense of, we appreciate you, we're going to be fair, because who knows what that's going to do to your brand down the road. So you have to think about that holistically. It can't just be, well, we didn't hire you, so peace out, right? It doesn't work like that in today's day and age.
Right. Yeah, and that's so important when we think about brand, whether we say employment brand or employee value proposition, that consumer brand and the employer brand have to be aligned. You don't want, people that are using your product or service to be raving about you, where behind the scenes your employees are dying to get away, or vice versa. So those should be as aligned as possible. There are organizations that I would never work for, but I would definitely shop with, and that shouldn't be the case.
Agree. All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing your feedback and thoughts here. So as we think about now, once you get that person in the door, once you have done all the things and you've got them here, what does that look like from an employee or a human resources perspective? So there are some things happening in the employee space as well when we think about challenges, right? Not just getting them in the door, you actually have to keep them, because think about what a mess that is when you bring someone in and things are misaligned. Now you have folks who are like, I don't want to be here, and they opt out. And now you're in that cycle of not only putting that extra time and effort from the TA side, but also the work isn't getting done. And so your organization is suffering. So we are seeing as well that challenge of engaging and retaining employees, and then looking at mentoring programs, things to keep them engaged. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And then also, what does that look like? And we alluded to this already, that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, what does that look like? Because that is what makes your organization sticky, right? That helps keep everyone together. So Jaime, we're going to flip this over to you and would love to have you talk about how you've seen HR change over the last 3 to 5+ years.
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to what Tiffany said just about what's happened in the last couple of years with the pandemic, as much of a force of evil the pandemic was, it actually required some positive changes in the workforce. It's challenged the way in which we work, how we think about getting work done, and forcing us really to look at what those new models of work are. Simultaneously, the digital transformation of organizations is also forcing us to evaluate new models of working. The World Economic Forum actually anticipates by 2025, there'll be a 50-50 split between AI and humans on all tasks. So if we think about that from a perspective of how we think about how work gets done and the role that HR plays in influencing from the time, Tiffany said this earlier, from this having TA brought in the very early stages to even determine what is this job actually today. Oftentimes we see a job description that was written in 2012 that really is no longer relevant. And it's our role in human resources between either that TA business partner or the HR business partner to really help force some of those conversations. Pandemic, again, really challenged our mental health as a society, as did social unrest that happened during the pandemic, in particular, if you're in the United States. And this has forced organizations to help remove the stigma around talking about mental health with employees, creating that safe space. Great organizations need to create a safe space to be able to talk about and offer solutions to guide and help their employees with really any type of wellness, but in particular, mental health, I think is just a big change we've seen in the last 3 to 5 years. I mentioned, how we think about getting work done. The use of technology and the flexibility in the work-life balance. What has come to us during this pandemic is the use of technology out of necessity to some degree, but also from an ability to connect in different ways. When we sent everyone home in March of 2020, we had to figure out how we were going to do this. Right. Things like, how are we replacing a water cooler chat? Because as much as HR tends to hate those water cooler chats, they're incredibly valuable to help understand the pulse of your organization. So how are you going to do that? Well, you've got to figure out how to do it through coffee clubs virtually or whatever the case might be to replace that. And so when I think about technology and heavily relying on technology, the first new hire we had start during the pandemic, we all looked at each other like, how are we doing this?
Yes, exactly. What's happening?
What are we doing? And so onboarding and thinking about how we need to shift to technology-led onboarding for new hires. And why go back? Now that we're, even if companies are going back to 100% in person, why would you go back to something that technology has replaced in a really actually positive way? Right. Again, just referencing Tiffany's comment about application in under a minute. Why would you ever change that? These are things we need to do for the market. And then Rebecca, you've mentioned this a couple of times, but I can't emphasize enough. The focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is going to pave the way for the future. Companies that do this well, that embed it into the fabric of their culture, will differentiate themselves, and not through an HR program and not through a specific goal. It really is embedding it into the fabric of our culture, and that's going to be a game changer for organizations and for the value that the HR organization brings to the company.
Right, because belonging is that key thing too. It's not just bringing folks into an organization that have different backgrounds or with streams of thoughts, but how do they feel included? How do they feel like they actually have a place? We talked about that, right? How can they show up and bring their whole self to work, whether they're remote, whether they're in person, whether they're doing a particular task? How do folks feel comfortable in the space that they're in with who they are?
That's exactly right. I like to use the analogy of fish in a pond. If you have a hole in the ground where you put water in and you put fish in there, and you have not thought about the environment those fish are going into, they're all going to die. And so
that's right.
We as an organization need to really think about the culture, the environment that we foster that supports the belonging and inclusion of all employees. Otherwise, we're just going to hire diverse talent to watch diverse talent leave that environment that they can't thrive in.
And that also then ties into all of the things we talked about with your brand, right? You're going to get that reputation for being an organization that does not support a variety of backgrounds, thoughts, genders, all of that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to pop into our next poll here, and we're going to ask you, when it comes to the employee experience, which of these following items do you believe is the most important? So we'll go ahead and pop that up. Whether it's enabling employees to own their own journeys, transparency around roles and opportunities, upskilling and reskilling to prepare employees for current and future roles, personalizing career development and learning plans, or access to mentors inside or outside the organization. And of course, there's a gazillion more things, but these were 5 that we thought might make sense to get your feedback on. So, all right. Oh, Tiffany, they're singing your song, right? That transparency around roles and opportunities within the organization.
Love it.
My hair is driving me crazy. It just keeps flying into my face. I'm annoyed. All right. All right. So we're getting some more that continue to come in. Again, focused on that transparency. Yeah. And Jamie, I know that you've got a couple of talking points around upskilling, reskilling. How do we help folks get to that next level? I think, can all agree that we've been very inconsistent as organizations around what that looks like, depending on where you're at and what resources you have available to you. So I think that will certainly be something that folks will continue to look for regardless of their roles. Looks like that one is the clear leader.
Yeah, I love seeing that. I think when I just think of Trimble in particular, it is probably our number one challenge and our biggest opportunity is transparency. We find employees leave Trimble because it was easier to find a role outside of Trimble than it was within it. So I, really excited, Rebecca, we've just launched into our partnership with Eightfold AI. And the buzz already since go live on employees getting matched with opportunities has just created this excitement of, I love Trimble. I don't have to leave Trimble.
Exactly.
We couldn't do that before without your technology. And so I kept telling people this is going to be a game changer for us, and it already is. And I'm super excited by it. Just a little plug for Eightfold AI there.
Yay,
but
yay.
It is a challenge for organizations. And you're going to lose talent outside if you don't figure out how to do it right internally.
Well, and it's changing from a personnel organization to a truly engaged, full understanding of what is happening inside of the people side, right? HR, sometimes I always cringe a little bit. We're like, I'm going to take you to HR. And you're like, no, we don't want to be the terminators or the bad cops, right? There's so many more things that happen inside of human resources, and talent acquisition is usually a part of that. But there's so many more things that happen inside of that people-focused part of the business that we don't always get a chance to see. So that transparency, I think, not even around roles and opportunities, but what is human resources really doing? What does that mean, right? So let's look at, I think we've got landed solidly on that 50% on that transparency, which I love to see. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what employees are looking for today.
Yeah, I, asked Rebecca to bring in Mercer's 2022 Global Talent Trends. There's a ton of global talent trends out there. But the reason I, felt really comfortable talking about these top 5 trends, and again, there's so many more than just this. But the reason I feel comfortable in talking about it is because it really resonates with me at Trimble. And Rebecca just mentioned, coming from that more kind of administrative, back office, compliance, police organization and HR to a really more strategic partner with the business. What employees are looking for, they're really looking for this reset for relevance in their climate they're working in. They want to know that their values that the company has are aligned with their own. They want to know that the company and the team can work through adaptive design, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later too, just around how we change our thinking to how we approach work in the future. Employees want to work with a company. They no longer want to work for a company. So they really want that partnership with the organization that they're at. Broken record here, but well-being, total well-being is more important to an employee than it ever has been. It isn't just about physical health. It's about financial health. It's about mental health. It's about that total package. And benefits still matter, but and how they're able to afford healthcare. But what they really do care more about is their whole self-centered. Can they bring their whole self to work? That's part of it as well. They want us to build for employability. They want to be invested in. This where skills gap analysis come into play. Employees no longer are comfortable just going into an organization and sitting idle. They want to know that if we are evolving for the future, so companies that are going through digital transformations, the employees are saying, what if I don't have the skill set to meet the new digital needs? What are you going to do for me? Right?
That upskilling and reskilling. Yep.
Yeah. And so we've said to our employees, like, there's a home here for you if you want it. If you want to learn a new skill, we'll teach you. We'll figure out how to best set you up for success. And then harnessing collective energy, that's really about unlocking the potential of the power of the team and really creating this human-centered work environment. And Rebecca knows this, but I'll share it with the group. We actually at Trimble rebranded, and you might be able to see it on my shirt here. We no longer call our function human resources. We have rebranded to people experience. We say PX for short, because we really, and it wasn't just a name change, it was a brand change. We went in with intentionality to address a lot of these bullets you see on here, but really to harness that collective human-centered energy that really will propel our organization into the future by treating people like people, not as assets, not as human capital or human resources, but really at the center of our operating system is people, and they are our number one asset, and we need to treat them as such.
So what should that partnership look like today? What kind of things should HR leaders, people leaders, be focusing on as they think about taking their business forward?
Yeah, I think this is going to be no surprise, but proactive versus reactive. I'll just give an example. Let's think about fair pay and social integrity. This, according to Mercer, it's one of their second top HR initiatives that companies are talking about, but yet only 23% of companies are actually doing anything about it. Transparency in pay is going to come at us from a compliance perspective. HR teams, get out in front of this. I put comp as part of that whole HR bucket. Get out in front of transparent pay. Make sure you're doing what's right before regulations tell you to do that. That drives huge trust in your organization. HR organizations need to be agile and flexible. No longer can we have 12-minute application processes. We need to be agile. We need to be flexible. We need to go where the market's going. Gig workers is a great example. How are organizations thinking about gig workers? How are they best utilizing them? Strong HR partners will, and they have been for years, but really more so than ever, really an extension of that business team, partnering with the business on things like ESG, leading skill gap analysis exercises, and then focusing on the development and upskilling and reskilling. One of the poll questions talked about, employees owning their path. And I think that has to be such a partnership with the business, and HR is such a big part of that partnership. Technology, we've mentioned this a couple times. HR teams need to help the business see what does working smarter, not harder look like.
Right.
If we really are switching to 50% of our work being driven through AI, what an impactful voice the HR team can have in driving that change. You can spend more money on value add stuff if you have the technology automate some of this work that no longer needs to be done from a human. And then finally, developing people insights. And I'm going to weave that into DEI in a second, but we can't just lead with gut. We need to lead with data, and we need to inform decision making, which actually it's a foundation of our DEI programs at Trimble. We do everything led through data, so we can keep a pulse on where we're exceeding our expectations and where we're falling flat. I say DEI must be woven into the fabric of the culture. And I mentioned it earlier that it can't just be a program. From hiring practices to policies to everything you do should be looked at in a new, fresh lens with a DEI and belonging perspective.
We've hit this one pretty hard, I think. I think there's no question about what we all feel about diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging. All of that has to be part of what an organization does, whether it's from the very beginning all the way through to the very end.
Exactly.
So I'm watching the clock here, so I'm going to skip over this next slide because, Jamie, I want to make sure that you get a chance to talk about your best practices that you want to recommend. So share with us these top 5 and why they stand out with you.
Yeah, there could be 20 here.
Right.
The reason I landed on these top 5 is I do think if you haven't yet, you need to reimagine the employee experience at your organization. How complex, how tough, how unlike your brand is it being an actual employee at your organization? Deliver on that total well-being and focus on mental wellness. I don't want a broken record, right? I would have been remiss not to put DEI and B into the fabric of a culture. On 4 though, don't underestimate what got you here. It will not get you there. We do need to reskill and upskill our employees, or we are going to be in a world of hurt as an organization because the world is changing.
There's only so many people to go around, right?
Only so many people to go around. Exactly. And then this hasn't been mentioned at all, which is why I put it in, because I wanted to put a plug in for cyber and data security. I think the HR organizations can play such a bigger role in keeping their proprietary information safe. And that starts with the right talent. That's a tight talent market today, cybersecurity. But make sure you're pushing your leaders to make sure they've got the right talent in place and the right programs in place to ensure safety around data and cybersecurity. Again, another just great place that HR organizations can add value.
Super smart. All right, we're coming into the home stretch here. I see we've only got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to switch here to our future predictions, and this will be a blend between all 3 of us. And I don't know if maybe we should talk about diversity and inclusion. Do you think? I think we clearly know that that's on the radar. Any other ones of these that we really want to call out before we get to our wrap-up slide?
I guess, Rebecca, I would just really quickly say on remote hybrid work, it's here to stay. And we should not think of that the same way we thought about it pre the pandemic. We really need to think about what does that future of work look like in a hybrid, different type of collaborative space.
Right. Yeah, definitely. How to collaborate and how the work needs to be done and what work needs to be done. Like you mentioned, Jamie, if we have a job description from 2012, is that relevant to what we're doing today? Like the person that was hired into that role is probably doing work differently. So figure out, what is the work that actually needs to be done? And then also, as you mentioned here, remote versus hybrid, making sure that we're making those accommodations and being as flexible as possible.
Right, because it's less about where you work than what you're doing and how you're contributing,
precisely.
Right? We're moving everything to that skills-based. It's not about your steaming cup of coffee on your desk. It's about what work are you doing and how are you able to move the organization forward. So way less focus on the space, but more focus on the skills. Other things that we wanted to chat about here, I think we've all agreed that the people-centric approach is going to be critical, whether it's being respectful to your candidates when they come into the process, whether it's acknowledging what folks are looking for when they join your organization, or helping them build their skill sets to be able to move into those new roles, career pathing, mentoring, all of that. People, I think, we thought it was really cool at first to do phone trees, and we thought answering machines are really cool. And now it feels like we're going backwards a little bit in terms of people I just want to talk to a person. I just want to feel human. I just want to be human, right? So let me be human in the way that it feels most comfortable for me. And sometimes that is putting in automation, but sometimes that's let's treat you the way we would want to be treated, right? That's an old adage, but right. All right, so we're going to roll on to our soundbite. So our wrap-up slide, the last 5 things that we want you to think about. We tried to summarize it. Probably we did it poorly because there's so many things to talk about. But when we think about those top 5 things to take away, right, removing those barriers to find, apply to, and qualify for positions, being transparent with candidates and reduce that time in the interview process, focus on total well-being and embed diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging into your company culture. Focus on creating career paths and opportunities for upskilling and reskilling for your employees. And focus on data and analytics to inform your decision-making across your organization. All right, so we've got maybe 30 seconds. Tiffany or Jamie, anything you want to say to wrap us up and send us out?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, we will be sending out this slide deck, so you will have the benefit of all of this information. Thank you all so much for joining. I think we'll flip it back over to the HCI team to close this out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Tiffany and Jamie, for your robust and rich presentation here today. Thrilled to hear some of the trends you talked about in terms of the importance of internal mobility, the changes in the candidate-driven marketplace, and really that people have shifted gears. So thank you all so much for really the enlightening perspective and the really rich ads that you put into this today. Just a reminder to our HCI members, today's webcast has been approved for HRCI and SHRM credit, as well as for HCI recertification. Your credits for attending this webcast will soon show up in your My HCI profile under the transcript tab. And while you're there, don't forget to check out hci.org for even more insights, as well as information on our certifications, virtual conferences, premium membership, and more. And I'd just like to say one more thank you to our presenters today, Rebecca, Tiffany, Jamie. Thank you all so very much. And also to the good people at Eightfold AI. I'd also like to thank you all, our webcast viewer. Thank you all for spending an hour with us. We'll see you next time.